So if I'm being totally honest, I feel like people get a little bit too emotional when it comes to their bike racks. Yeah, I'm talking about like your Hitch bike rack meant to carry a bike from one place to another. Now for me, a bike rack is really just a tool meant to carry a bike from one place to another, and it really has no bearing on the bike or the gear that you even use. Sure, some cost way more than others, but they ultimately serve the same purpose. So I think for starters, let's just all relax and recognize that it's just a bike rack. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at this bike rack from a company called Benton, who definitely don't take themselves too seriously and who are trying to offer high quality bike racks that are functional at an affordable price point. Now this is a rack meant for a 2-inch hitch. With the box open here, it looks like we're going to have some assembly required. Okay, so we got the rack installed. I looked at my time-lapse footage. It took 23 minutes and change. Not too bad. I actually thought it was going to take a lot longer than it did. So as far as functions go, it's got an anti-rattle pin, which means the bolt screws through the hitch pin. There's a locking nut on the other side with a little safety clip so the nut doesn't fall off. There's actually a kind of cool feature, which is this memory lock. Once you get the rack installed for the first time, you slide this sort of memory lock up against the trailer hitch receiver. And that way, when you take it off, the next time you go to put it back on, you slide it all the way in until it hits that memory lock, and the hole should be perfectly lined up. So kind of a neat feature. As far as the build quality, it looks like a cheaper rack, I have to admit. It doesn't have like the trays that go all the way across, but the build quality actually is pretty solid. Once fully assembled, the rack weighs somewhere on the order of 60 to 65 pounds, which is right in line for like a 2-bike sort of hitch rack like this. I think it weighs just about the same as like the Kuat NV 2.0 base. The construction is all steel for the main parts, and it's all powder coated this kind of dark gray color. So what's different about this rack than say like the Kuat NV rack is the NV has a bike tray with one wheel cradle and a single arm that comes up and grabs that front wheel, and then you just cinch the back wheel down on the flat tray. I do believe that there's a fundamental flaw with that design, because that design relies on friction in this joint here to prevent forward and backward motion of the bike, which I think is just not a great design choice overall. What Benton have done here to address that problem is they've provided wheel cradles for the front and the rear. So the cradles themselves will actually prevent the bike from rolling back and forth. And then the only job of the arm here is just to provide that downward force to prevent the bike from lifting up. The rack itself has 3 positions, so you just push this button on the front. What's really cool actually is when the rack is off of the car, the hitch part will fold all the way up into the rack, which makes it a lot easier to store than some other racks. While it's on the vehicle, this will be your main stowed position. When it's in use, it'll be in this position here. And then if you want it to get into the hatch, you can also drop the rack down here and open up the hatch and get to your gear. All right, so I'm gonna grab my 2 full-size mountain bikes. I'm going to load them up on the rack, and then we'll go for a drive and check out how stable the rack is, and if there's any concerns that I have with how the rack can actually securely hold a big heavy bike. All right, so some things I haven't mentioned about the bike rack yet. It retails for $379, which if you think about its competition, there are some really cheap hitch bike racks you can get, but they definitely don't have the same features as the Benton one here. So as far as key features, the Benton Shifts Grins, I keep wanting to say shits and giggles. The rack can carry 2 bikes in its stock form, but you can also get an additional 2-bike add-on, which makes it capable of carrying up to 4 bikes. Weight capacity for each of the trays on this rack is 55 pounds. So definitely not as high as some of the beefier racks out there, but personally for me, I don't own any e-bikes, and my heaviest mountain bike is a Santa Cruz High Tower that's on there right now, and that's probably 35 pounds. Both the front and the rear wheel cradles are adjustable, so you can slide those left and right as you like. So for me, it took me a little bit of time just to get those set up for the first time when I put these bikes on the rack. If you switch out your bikes a lot and you've got a lot of different bikes with very different wheelbases, then yeah, you will have to mess around with the wheel cradles every time you switch out a bike. Right here, we're entering Murphy Ranch Park. There's a little bit of a driveway here. I'm just gonna kind of drive up the driveway here and just kind of see what happens. Yeah, so that was a pretty awkward side hit there. Let me spin around and just exit the driveway rather aggressively. Okay, so coming out the driveway. So you see that the entire rack sways a little bit, which is to be expected. I mean, there's probably 70 pounds of bikes on there right now. One thing that I forgot to mention is that the Benton rack here does not have built-in locks. On the Ceres rack that I've been using, on the Kuat rack that I've used in the past, those actually both had built-in cable locks, which, you know, a serious bike thief could come and clip those really quickly. But I actually found myself using those quite frequently when I just had to make a quick stop to run into a store or something. The Benton rack here does not have any kind of built-in lock or security features. So that is one thing to note. So anyways, I got a bunch of speed bumps ahead of me right here. I'm gonna hit them at some awkward angles. The first one, I'll just drive my right side over, and you can kind of see what that looks like. The second speed bump, I'll drive over both of them kind of quickly at an angle here. And you see that the bike rack itself kind of tilted. And that was actually pretty anticlimactic. I'm gonna turn around and do those again. And then this one I'll just hit straight on at 15 miles an hour. Okay, so then the whole rack lifted up a little bit. And this one again, I'll go over at kind of an angle. Really kind of test the torsional stability of the rack there. So there you go. That's like way faster than I would ever drive over any speed bump on a normal basis. By the way, all the sort of extra footage that you're seeing today, like the time lapses and the out the back window footage, that's all being shot on the Insta360 Ace Pro 2. I mentioned a few videos ago, but Insta360 is actually a channel sponsor for the year of 2025. All it really means is that over the course of the year, I'll be putting out a few videos showcasing some of the Insta360 cameras that I already use. So the Ace Pro 2 is their latest, like, more traditional action camera. It's not 360, it's just a single lens forward facing. But what's really cool about it is that it shoots up to 8K. It's got a much larger sensor size, so it's a larger sensor than the GoPro, which means it does a lot better in low light situations. And instead of a front-facing screen for vlogging, it actually has a flip-up screen. So you use the main screen as both the rear-facing and the front-facing screen, which I think is a pretty cool innovation, something that I personally use if I'm bringing this camera out to vlog with. But for me, I've primarily used the Ace Pro 2 for things like this, where I need an extra camera just to get that additional view. And it's one of the several cameras that I'll be featuring this year on the channel. Whoa. That is kind of a weird thing that the whole tire cradle just comes off, but if you wanted to, you could put a little stopper in there to prevent it from coming all the way off. So something that I'm particularly interested in is if it can carry a much smaller bike, like this 20-inch bike here. I'm just going to slide the cradles closer together, and we'll see if the bar will grab the wheel. And yeah, I have to say that's a much more secure grab. That's just a much better hold. This is something that the Kuat rack can't really do that well, and neither can the dual arm style racks either. Cool, pretty pleased with that. But there is one thing that gave me a little bit of concern. I'm not sure if I can replicate it here, but as I was cinching this down for the kids' bike, I did notice that the ratchet started to slip. I'm trying to replicate it here, but I think if oh, see, look at that. It can actually kind of just pulled straight through. And I think it has to do with if the ratchet's not perfectly lined up with the housing, which is definitely cause for concern. Now, while you're driving, if it's under tension, I can't really see, like it won't just suddenly give way. It's that if you happen to be fiddling with it and it gets a little bit off angle, then it can slip a little bit. But I would say that once you strap the tire down and you're sure that it's tight, I don't have any reason to believe that it will suddenly slip. But that is just something to note there. All right, so there you go. For $379 US in early 2025, you get a pretty decent 2-inch, 2-bike hitch rack that's very capable of holding bikes from 20 inches, and probably smaller to be honest, all the way up to a full-size 29er mountain bike. Again, assembly took me about 25 minutes in total, from opening the box to fully installed. And of course, at this price point, the rack is going to lack some of the nicer features, like the sleek 2-tray, aesthetic, and built-in locks. But again, for $379, it's hard to expect all of that. Again, the two things that I primarily wanted to test were this rack's capability of holding and securing big full-size mountain bikes, which I think it did fantastically, and also its ability to quickly adjust just to hold a much smaller bike, like my kids' 20-inch bikes here. And again, it actually surpassed the other racks in that regard. And I have to say, for a relatively budget-friendly rack, I'm pretty pleased with the Benton Shifts Grins. Can't say it. I think maybe they could work on their naming for their products a little bit, but as it stands now, the Shifts and Grins 2-bike hitch rack is definitely a solid offering in my opinion. Now again, you can't order the rack directly off of Benton's website. The website will actually redirect you to eTrailer.com, which is the distributor of these racks, and it's the company who sent this rack system over for review. If you have any questions about my experience with the rack so far, just drop them down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. Thanks again for watching, and thanks for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, we'll see you next time.